Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon to wherever you may be as you tune in today. Thank you so much for joining us. And for those who have joined us for the first time, this webinar series is focused on HR and workplace topics with the lens of culture, DEI, and sustainability. I am Dr. Tiffany Ingram, DEI advisor at Our Office, where we help organizations with processes, expertise, data, and technology that you need to build a more inclusive workplace. And our end-to-end solution for workplace culture, diversity, equity, inclusion works especially well for small and medium-sized organizations who want to focus on DEI, but may be stretched too thin for time or resources. I want to thank Laura Hanchett so much. She is a employee benefits expert, VP of Employee Benefits at USI Insurance Services. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. And we'll get to know a little bit more about Laura in just a moment. But before we dive into our conversation, we want to make sure that you are familiar with some logistics. Of course, we are using the Zoom webinar tool, which many of you all are familiar with. This will be an interactive webinar. So we will have a few polls throughout to get your input to join in on the conversation. Please note that the chat function to provide your comments. We also welcome questions throughout the webinar that you can put in the Q&A panel as well. We will have one of our colleagues at our office, Anishka Sharif, who will be moderating our questions in real time and chiming in as needed. Thank you so much, Anishka. And we will answer as many questions we can at the end and afterwards if needed. As long as you provide your email address when you send in your question, we'll make sure that we get to it. And please note this session will be recorded and will be available after the webinar in our events page at ouroffice.io/events. And last but not least, this webinar is approved by SHRM and our HRIC recertification credits, and you will get this opportunity to get the activity codes at the completion of our webinar. So we invite you to stay a whole time to join in on the discussion today. And let's do introductions. So a little bit about myself. Again, I'm the DEI advisor here, one of the DEI advisors at our office. And what ties me to the work of diversity, equity, inclusion is my dissertation, where my research focused on the intersectionality of age, race, and gender as it relates to the advancement of African-American millennial women in the workplace. So I am very passionate about working with small and medium-sized organizations to develop a workplace culture where all their employees can thrive and grow and feel included in the workplace. So I'm excited about the work we do here at our office. But Laura, we need to hear a lot more about you. We're delighted to have you, your wealth of expertise and experience. Would love to know a little bit more about you, your personal story, and how you ended up in this world of employee benefits.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Tiffany. I ended up in benefits in the most bizarre manner, but I will tell you, it has been quite a wonderful journey. Believe it or not, I started off as a music teacher and opera major. Through a confluence of events, ended up getting to know my banker very well because I had a lack of money, and ended up entering the world of banking, which led me to payroll, HR, and benefits administration, where for 21 years, I had the pleasure of working with all different size clients, whether they were, US or global. And in that time frame, when healthcare reform initially launched, I was very interested in the legality, the nuances, the administration. And so I like to call it my 11-month vacation from my 21 years. And I went to a benefits administrative company. In that time, prior and after, I'd had the pleasure of working with a number of benefits brokers. And throughout the years, multiple brokers told me, you should do this business. This is something you're passionate about. This is something you understand. You already know how the communication works, the coordination works, the compliance works. And so in the middle of COVID, I finally, after thinking about it for 12 years, decided to look at multiple different organizations where I could join. And I selected USI because it fit in with my data background. It fit in with my very straightforward pricing and cost philosophy. And it allows me to make what I believe is a true difference in the everyday life of employees and employers. So that is how the opera singing music teacher ended up in employment benefit, legal consulting.
Okay, perfect. I love people who have diverse backgrounds and bring them to like where they are today. And I think the topic around employee benefits is so candid and needed conversation, timely with open enrollment season starting. As organizations work to increase diversity of their employees, employers just have to make sure that their benefit packages that they offer are reflective of employees' diverse needs. There's so much talk about benefits. Can you just give us a general definition of employee benefits to kind of ground our discussion today?
Absolutely. And so I focus on, health and welfare benefits, but I'm well aware that, employee benefits are total rewards. So they involve any kind of wage or non-wage compensation or value add. Benefits are genuinely accepted thing in the US, right? And when people think of benefits in the US, they are typically thinking of medical and dental and vision in the olden days. Now, as you move forward, right, then there are all sorts of tax codes. And, as this US moved away from the pension programs and things like, then people think 401k next. And then, today you see people moving on to, I need mental health, I need and want flexible lifestyle funds. And so what I would say is my goal and role in working with my clients is to focus on all of the aspects and bring in the specialists where I am not a specialist, and to think about where and how what we're doing fits in with how, where, and when people are going to interact with their benefits.
Most definitely. And I think it is hard for employers. It has to be to find that balance of offering everything, or maybe you can't offer everything, right? With multiple generations in the workforce currently, in what ways have you seen the diverse needs of employees impact how organizations are making decisions around employee benefits, like what they offer?
Well, and I think it's shifted quite a bit during COVID because, employers of all sizes are experiencing a difficulty with, the great resignation, with, sort of that quiet quitting where people are still working there, but not really working. And where there are little clients of mine, whether they're small, large, whatever, that just simply can't find people that want to work. So it's more competitive than ever to even just find the people who want to work, to keep the people they want to keep. There's large discussions even where, we'd like to get rid of, employee A who's not pulling his or her weight. But if I do that, then my whole production line slows down. So I guess I better keep that employee versus not having that employee. So it's a complex world right now. You have your blue collar, your white collar, your in between, you have your remote, you have your on-site, and now you have the hybrid to consider. And so there are just so many different ways that an employer needs to think about how they're going to communicate, when they're going to communicate, and really what can they afford and what can they not afford. Even though they may think they can't afford something, what can they do that will at least ensure the employees are interested in giving them a shot at
Most
employment.
definitely. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about how benefits can even possibly impact recruiting further on in our discussion. I do want to launch our first poll to hear from our audience members around their understanding of employee benefits and ensuring equity of access for all. The poll is launched. I would love to hear. A lot of people don't know much about employee benefits. Sometimes you just work somewhere, you're like, I don't know. But I would love to hear from those of you who tuned in today about kind of rating your organization in terms of that. And little definition, I'm sorry, around how that looks when you say aware. Okay, I'll give folks a few more moments to, folks are casting their votes, so we'll give them a few more seconds to do that, just to kind of ground our discussion and see where folks are kind of thinking. All right. About 5 more seconds for people to vote. And we can close it out. It looks like it's tied in some areas. We can share out those results. A lot of folks, looks like it seems they're around that aware and focused stage. They understand the benefits are important, but they know they may need to make some improvements. And some folks are kind of narrowing their efforts to kind of diversify those packages. So thank you so much for sharing. I think it's good to know where people are in terms of their understanding of employee benefits. And we'll talk a lot about equity and access for folks later on in our discussion. Laura, you brought up a good point around the pandemic and how things have changed. And now we say endemic because it looks like we're towards the end of the COVID-19 pandemic as we are going into basically year 3 soon. People realize mostly kind of what you shared about the balance of employee health and wellness, and that employers have to value the well-being of their employees and provide support for them to have a healthy work-life balance. And employee benefits are often key in promoting that wellness throughout the organization. A lot of times it seems like people don't know what their employees need. So in your opinion, what ways can organizations kind of figure out what benefits employees need or want? How do you figure out what's useful for folks, what they would like to see? Any tips on that?
Absolutely. So what I'd say is, in the past, I think it was okay to look at the articles and news feeds. At this point, it's really important to spend time asking the employees what they want and doing it in a manner where they feel comfortable explaining. So, fireside chats in some organizations work well. Employee surveys work better in others. Sometimes it's both. I would say definitely in recruiting, if someone decides to come with you, why did you come with us? If someone decides not to accept your offer, why didn't you join our company? I say exit polls are absolutely critical, and having them be a really safe ideally, and I know it's very small for this, hard for the smaller organizations, but if you can have a third party or a way that people feel they can give feedback in a safe environment, I think you'll get some very intriguing information there. So, again, I'd say in the United States, medical's rated #1 as the #1 request. Dental's rated the second, but from there on, it can really differ depending on the kind of employer.
Yeah, definitely. And I think employers may offer a lot of things. I've worked for places who had a whole litany of things to offer, but it was very hard to navigate what I could sign up for, how much would it cost, and what does it mean? And open enrollment can be very confusing for folks.
Yeah.
So even on this slide, we show that 41% of employees find their company's open enrollment process extremely confusing. I have friends who've totally missed open enrollment because it's like, I didn't know what they were communicating. I didn't know what I was supposed to click. So in your opinion, what ways can employers better streamline that open enrollment process for employees?
Well, and I think there are several elements. First element is the planning process, which should start as early as possible. And I think people should consider it a year round versus a one time a year program. Now that's easier for an organization that, let's say, has enough roles in human resources or a dedicated position. I see in some of the smaller organizations, sometimes you'll see a benefits payroll manager, or, it's HR and benefits. The larger the organization, then sometimes you'll see benefits manager, a benefits director, a total rewards director, compensation planning. It's very difficult for someone who's maybe even operating in the smallest of organizations without an HR director. So in those cases, you can outsource some of those things, whether it's having an involved broker like me at USI with some support there, or whether it's going to a professional employer organization where you share in some of those benefits and HR tips and strategy. But what I would say is specific to open enrollment, early communication, often multiple vehicles, because people receive information in different ways. So if you can potentially do it, if everybody's on a mobile phone, then all the communication needs to be mobile and it needs to be accessible from anywhere. Many employers and employees don't even have work email addresses. And so many times also statistically, it's not the employee who's doing the enrollment and making those decisions. It's actually spouses that do the majority of it. And, while I was at ADP, and this is about a decade ago, we were researching when people went online on their online enrollment system. And at that time, regardless of blue collar, white collar, whatever, it was actually the Thursday and Friday, let's say, as it was closing as open enrollment, late at night, like between 8 and midnight. Most people were going online, even though, people would say, don't do it last minute. So communication, I would say having the right tools. I'd urge people to be very careful not to have some of the HIPAA kinds of conversations where, someone walks into their office and says, hey, I have cancer, and no, I don't, that's something, you want to guide people to feel comfortable with your HR. But if you're getting those kinds of questions, you just legally should not really have them. So you're going to want to either have your health plan provide some of that guidance to those employees, or your broker's call center line. And I guess I'd lastly say decision tools are key. And I know they can feel expensive, but there are some excellent decision tools that are either embedded in some of the benefits enrollment systems or external, which help employees understand. And sometimes the best tools will not only give some guidance about what is an HSA, what is a high deductible plan, but they'll also have a series of questions that help target the employee based on their answers, right? To help them choose wisely, to help them choose the plan that's going to make the most sense. Because sometimes the high deductible plan is actually the least expensive route to go, and people don't always expect it. So I'd say communication, the right tools at the right time, and decision-making tools are some of my very favorites.
Thank you so much. And we did get a question from one of our attendees today around at what size, when the organizations are growing, should an organization kind of think about having a solely dedicated benefits administrator? How large should you be? How many employees should you be looking at to say you need to have a dedicated person?
I wish there was a surefire answer. I will say that, SHRM, the Society of Human Resources, recommends there's at least one HR professional for every 400 employees. I have seen organizations as large as, in a couple thousands, where there are maybe like so few people in HR, maybe 4 people. And then I've seen organizations where, human capital and employees and benefits are absolutely their priority. And so, they have 2 or 3 HR managers and let's say 2 benefits, an assistant and a manager, and let's say there were only several hundred employees. So what I would say is, if you don't have an HR professional and you're over 50 employees, you really need to hire that out, because there are so many legal requirements that hit a company when they hit 50 employees, and becomes very, very difficult for, people wearing lots of hats to ensure that they are compliant. So I didn't really address the question. I would say in the hundreds of employees, if at all humanly possible, have someone, even if it's just like a payroll benefits manager, or if it's an HR employment, position coupled with benefits. I hope that addressed the question.
Most definitely. Thank you. No, that is a good question. I think the HR teams, it's hard because you want to have a full team, but it depends on what your budget can allow. And I think HR is there when you start. They're there when you are in critical need of something, life events, things are happening, and they're there when you exit. So the HR team is very, very important in organizations. So thank you for sharing your knowledge on that. Again, employee benefits coupled with wellness, this is the big discussion. And I think, I know the history of like employee benefits and supporting benefits in this, but this wellness part is new relatively. And I don't know if this was a before COVID thing, people were talking about it as much, but I feel like after COVID, as we reach this endemic, so much talk about wellness is there. So can you talk a little bit more about why including wellness in the benefits discussion is important in this day and age?
Sure, absolutely. So there's so many components to wellness, right? So within the medical realm, wellness has been a discussion for quite some time. And lots of research and ROI went out originally. And what we found specific to, let's say, medical wellness is that, the results are really very mixed, in the sense that people like it. It is here to stay. Now there are ways to engage employees that are more meaningful, that have more demonstrable return on investment. And the return on investment, not just monetarily, but also results in bettering the lives of their employees, right? So what I would say is, your wellness in regards to medical, dental, vision should be where you engage a primary physician. So we call it incentivized primary physician. Now, having a health fair with biometrics and having people, do some real age test entry into their health risk assessments, I'm not saying throw out the baby with the bathwater. Those are better than nothing. Having incentivized things where people, do an action and get a gift card, or, making an incentive to have people go at least do certain levels of things in either the cost of their benefits. You can legally impact up to 30% of a cost in wellness. I think, there are things people are doing, like helping people try to quit smoking, helping people with diabetes programs, helping people lose weight. So there's that whole aspect we could spend a whole hour talking about. But then when you talk about mental wellness, and how people are taking time because they're burnt out and they can't function, my clients and our research is showing a 40% uptick in mental benefit usage. And I've put in more EAPs, and we've changed the EAPs to be dedicated service this year, because HR teams are having to refer mandatory referrals of employees that are struggling with addiction, with, tardy being late, missing work, those sorts of things. So I'll tell you, an EAP or an employee assistance program, is something that a lot of health plans will give you, but there are really very big differences in what you get and who can use the program many times. So I would say that there's physical well-being, there's mental well-being. Some people are even added in some guided meditation apps, some genuine practices of work meditation. I've even seen in a sales meeting I participated in while at a technology company, right? And then there's the financial wellness side of things. So, it's been proven statistically that a lot of employees in all different economic ranges. So maybe not even the uber rich, but I'm talking people who make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year are worried about money. And when people worried about money and their finances, they can lose up to a third of their work focus. And if you lose a third of your employees' productivity, that has a cost as well. So even though a financial wellness program, might take people away from the floor for a little bit, or may have some per employee per month fees and things like that, if you can get your employees tools, like there are some amazing things going on with payment programs, for example, to help people with their high deductible the difference between, what cash they may have in their account and what that large deductible is, so that they don't delay care. Because believe it or not, if they delay care, it makes it worse because the cost and the severity is worse. But people don't know how they're going to get from $400 to that $2,000, $3,000 deductible. So there are new programs that help with that are hitting the market. There are new tax subsidies that are helping with some, and legal changes that are helping with student loan repayment and 401k marriage. And so what I would say is then just budgeting, helping people have some tools to understand how to budget. So, and then lastly is thinking about what they're facing in their life, because elder care and younger care and, I think the pandemic and endemic has shifted. Now people see that remote work can happen, and they do have parents, even in all age groups, that they're caring for. And so if the employer recognizes and has, I've seen people add, emergency care as a benefit. And there are some of these benefits that come inside of other programs that the employer may already be receiving. So there are some legal help things inside EAPs. There are some, financial wellness tools and information in some of them. So, what I would say is ask your broker consultant to see the flyers, the sales flyers that they send out to people like me, explaining the value proposition of their program, to make sure that the employer can take advantage of absolutely every single service they're already paying for. I hope that addressed the question.
Yeah, most definitely. And I will say, we see a comment from one of the attendees saying, didn't realize how many people actually worry about pay. Even when you're like upper middle income, it is an issue. And I think given with the pandemic, I know quite a few of my friends now are like either taking care of elderly parents or very involved in their care, or have had babies. And like now the discussion becomes like, how do we figure all of this out? There are people who I know are paying for, home health aides for older generations of folks, and people who are also battling with childcare, right? And the daycare costs that are so high that really truly impact your budgeting overall, on top of student loans. So I do have one friend who is who has as one of her benefits, she gets to talk to a financial planner twice a year, and it has really truly changed her scope. She thought that was something that wasn't attainable to her, but luckily her employer offered that benefit. And we can't, I would be remiss without talking about mental health in this time, and the accessibility that's increased for folks to be able to reach out to a licensed therapist and be able to have someone to consult with. Telehealth has truly changed how people are able to access that benefit. And I think it's something that a lot of people have tapped into at some point in these last 3 years, just to be able to seek support, since it in many cases is a part of people's EAP program. So benefits overall. So there's so much to chat about benefits. And I feel like we're getting a lot of feedback from our audience as well. Would love to start with our next poll of talking about their main reason for their employer's interest in improving employee benefits and wellness offerings. If your organization is thinking about it, why? We would love to hear from you in this discussion as well. And the clients that we work with at our office, folks talk about benefits, and definitely recruitment is always a conversation because people want to know about your benefits package when you're recruiting them to join. And it looks like a lot of folks are experiencing that as well when recruiting new employees. I will give folks probably about a few more seconds to participate in the poll. We encourage everyone that's joined us today to share their thoughts. And it sees the winner is beneficial for recruiting employees right now, but we will see everybody give about 10 more seconds and we will close it out. Okay, we'll end the poll and share it. At the top, 75% of folks talk about beneficial for recruiting new employees and current employee concerns. 25% is kind of the reason for wanting to improve the benefits and wellness offerings. So we'll stop sharing that. And we'll talk about trends. I think we've talked a little bit about the traditional paid employee benefits, that medical, dental, even vision in some ways. And there's some more innovative benefits that folks are offering that may not be even beyond the mental health or financial planning. There are pet insurance. People are talking about tuition reimbursement, fitness center, or gym memberships. Can you talk a little bit more about how you may see small and medium-sized businesses being able to compete with these new trends? Some of the things are very fancy. I have a friend who works for a tech company and she gets to reimburse like all her wellness stuff. So she goes to get a massage every month. She gets acupuncture every month. She's able to expense that, but that's a huge company that she works for. How do you see small and medium-sized businesses being able to compete with some of these luxurious kind of innovative benefits that some folks have?
Absolutely. So what I would say is tech companies and pharmaceutical and such are known industries for really having very high end and very innovative and fresh benefits. Sometimes an employer can accommodate those sorts of things in designing their plan, their health plan. So, one of my clients this year did a survey and found that increasing the number of chiropractic visits was one of their chief concerns. They have employees who do inspections and pipelines, and it made sense for them not only to add more chiropractic care, but also to ask for safety glasses. We were able to change the design of their plans to include, 10 more chiropractic visits a year. The incremental cost was less than, 1%, and then add the safety glasses into their vision program for what ended up being zero. And so those things will make the employees very happy this year. Now, what you were referencing before is more like lifestyle funds, which is a very large in trends where an employer will determine, okay, I can afford, let's say X dollars per month. And I'm going to allow the employee to go use it for certain categories. So the employer that your friend is working with most likely has a lifestyle fund reimbursement account, and they could do a gym membership, or they can have a massage, or they could go get acupuncture, or, some employers even have home office goodies, candles, equipment, things like that. There's a whole nother level up and even above that where you can get into some of the family forming benefits that some of the innovative employers are going for. And, family forming is everything from in vitro to, safety for mothers that are pregnant, planning the emotional, those sorts of things. So, what I would say is, how do small employers get this? My recommendation is, ask your payroll or HR vendor if they have a discount program, because the first thing I would do for my clients was say, are you aware that, that there's a program that automatically you click a button, turns on, and there's no cost, and your employees can get up to 20% off their cell phone bills. And so using those sorts of perks that can be out there, that you may already have. For example, most health plans have some discount perk programs as well. I know, for example, our Blue Cross Blue Shield has certain discounts at gyms and certain discounts on, wearable technology and things like that. I would say every year it's crucial to get a wellness budget, if possible, from your health plan. And that is a negotiation, that the broker should work out for you. But hopefully those things would be money for health fairs, or money for, paying for wearable devices, especially for a very small organization, or just helping out employees in need. I've seen some employers even have a PTO donation, right? Just finding ways that are already in your budget are crucial. And then, of course, worst case, if you really cannot afford insurance, then, you have to budget for what the penalties are if you're over 50 employees with the government for the Affordable Care Act. But you might be able to do an ICHRA, which is an individual type of employee health plan, and give a certain dollar contribution amount for each individual employees. But you have to really work with a good consultant on that, because you have to still meet the affordability number. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge for the small employer. That is why sometimes people use professional employer organization type of situations until they grow to a certain size. So I'd say ask everyone, ask technology, ask your benefit provider, ask your benefit plan, and I'd say always ask, what can you do for me for free? And don't be afraid to ask that question, because sometimes the answer is a lot and they just didn't think to offer it or highlight it with you.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I think there's so many ways that people need support and need help in their life, because everybody has so much going on, and every employee is at a different stage of life. And I know smaller organizations may have to do things in group settings and instead of maybe individualizing things. But I know one of the trends we also talked about earlier is elder care. What benefits are employers, I would say, offering for those people who have to take care of their parents? How may that look in a small or medium-sized organization? Is that EAP connection? How are people maybe time off, being able to some of their flex spending for their parent? How does that work possibly? What would that benefit look like for folks at different levels in the organization, small and medium size?
I would say, a first level approach would be to look at what's included in your EAP. And that may be education. It may be reading and information on where to go. It may be literally a referral to an organization that will help, that's either free or low fee. The next level up would be to, have what they call a buy up in an EAP or an employee assistance program, where maybe they offer, even they can layer on, things like phone centers and talking to people instead of just a link to resources, right? Some will even help with paperwork. Some of the legal plans that are out there will actually do some assistance with helping with elder care and wills and power of attorneys and things like that. And then there are multiple different organizations that actually offer elder care coverage. And those things may be where the company is willing to pay for any kind of to make sure it hits all generations and diverse types of needs, where they have emergency care for whether it's your child, whether it's your dependent adult, whether it's an elderly parent. And you know, I've seen employers add up to X numbers per days per year. You know, sometimes it's small, sometimes it's 1, 2, or 3 days, but at least there's something there. And it's also a way for the employer to advertise, we have these resources for you. We know this is impacting your life, you know, and encourage people to speak with their management, but they have to train their managers to know how to address it or make sure it goes to HR. But I would say that, you know, flexible PTO or paid time off is something that I see a lot of employers doing. I mean, a lot of times a smaller organization candidly can't afford to offer FMLA if they're not, or Family Medical Leave Act, if they are not large enough and required to offer it. And I know that that perception out in the marketplace might be, well, I can't believe they don't do that. Well, it's unfortunate, but sometimes an employer that is that small, I mean, I've seen employers go without their own income for extended periods of time during COVID so that their employees could have benefits and pay. So I think it's important that we as a society try not to judge those that can't sometimes provide those, but then it may make sense for an employee, right, who is in need of some more flexibility to look at and consider that when they're determining where they can be employed, you know, at that period of time in their life.
Yeah, and I think it brings ties in a good discussion. We have another question in the chat around flexible scheduling, because that is something that, you know, when you're going to a new organization, people are looking for that. Like, I want a flexible schedule. What does that really mean? And I feel like it probably has a very broad definition, but I would love to hear your thoughts on that, because I think part of it is kind of embedded in the conversation about benefits and being able to, when you say total rewards package, I feel like people talk about that, and that along with pay and benefits.
So like you would benchmark your compensation, you would hope at least every few years, but ideally annually. And right now I've seen employers have to do it every half a year, if not more often, because people were falling off. They would, you know, offer them a job and then they disappear. And, you know, several HR leaders found that, you know, with inflation, that their offer that they gave 2 months ago was no longer even competitive, right? But to answer the question, you know, what does flexible time off mean? I think it means different things for different jobs and different kinds of employers. And I think, you know, there are certain jobs that could be done pretty much anywhere, anytime. They just need to be done. And then there are jobs that, you know, you have a call center and people are calling in at certain times of the day, and you have to have that staffed for your service level agreements. That employer is gonna have a lot less flexibility in what they can offer. Although they could offer potentially, you know, working from home, you know, type of policies in that case to give a little more flexibility. So what I would say is the policies need to be clear. It's really an employment law area. You need to look at every single state you're doing business in. You need to figure out what the paid time off laws are, whether sick is required or not. You know, then and that's the first step. Before then you get to philosophy and you get to culture and you get to what's really going to work. I think you need to ask your employees if you're willing to look at the answers. If you're not, don't ask, right? What would it what would make it more possible for you to do your job. Sometimes that's making sure the American with Disabilities process and paperwork is very clear and very easy to find. And it's also informing managers to say, all right, go to speak with HR, have a conversation. There may be times where a smaller employer really cannot make, like, for example, they have people out on the manufacturing floor. And, if a station is down, they may absolutely not be able to be flexible, but as flexible as an employer can be, and budgeting appropriately for some staffing companies or for 1099s, or some of those things are really important, because if an employer kind of sticks their head in the sand and goes, well, we can't do it, we can't offer it, so thou shalt do this. It's kind of like telling a kid not to put their hand in the cookie jar. They're going to go and try to figure out how to do it, just because they were told no. Whereas if you have a conversation about how can we make this work, right? They're like, I highly encourage employers, when they can afford to put in your short-term and long-term disability, to also ask the questions around return to work incentives, because not every disability type of program, right, offers return to work incentives. So what I'd say is it is hard. There are some amazing innovative programs out there that'll help avoid burnout, that integrate with times of year and scheduling and preferences, that even help employees schedule vacations with their unused PTO. But those are bigger, those are more innovative. Those are not probably something somebody with 50 or 5 employees is going to put in. So I would say encourage the HR professionals and owners to think about, what can we do? What are people asking for? And to speak with an employment legal, that's my number one, is always speak with an employment lawyer.
Most definitely. And I think even the question of not even just flexible time off, but flexible scheduling. And I think I've seen that done in many different ways with telework policies and hybrid work, where, I was at an organization where it was like, you can stay at home for 2 days a week, but you get to pick your days. We're not going to tell you what days you pick. We're not going to tell you, if they're back to back or if they're every other. You get to pick the days. I also know people who work at organizations where they say our set working hours are, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And that gives people leeway. If you want to take your kid to school, just, be at your desk between these times. Right. Or folks who are saying they're okay with people doing like these power hours between like 7 a.m. and 10 a.m. and then kind of more lax in the afternoon, and then you come back in the evening and wrap things up. I think it really truly does depend what industry you're working in. Of course, if you're working on a plant line, you may not be able to have that flexibility. I feel like, in some ways, is it a myth that small and medium-sized organizations can't have flexibility? Or even, let's say, with scheduling, is it possible for a small or medium-sized organization to be able to offer flexibility? Is it really that complex?
Yeah, I think it's a myth for many organizations. I would encourage every employer to benchmark themselves and their industry. And there are multiple firms that offer great benchmarking with paid time off, with all different kinds of total rewards. And I think it's important for organizations to look at the data. If they really feel like they can't do something, but everyone else in their industry and size is doing it, then there's really something to talk about, and they may need to bring in an outside perspective and view.
Most definitely. We're going to move on to, really talking about benefits packages is a tedious process. So if folks want to update it, right? I think we touched on this a little bit. If people like, maybe not this year because it's too late for people who maybe open enrollment season is opening. But if you want to review or update your benefits package, how often should employers be thinking about that?
I really believe this is an every year what's different, what's new, what's affecting us, what's affecting our people, what's impacting performance. I believe every year, you don't necessarily have to change something, but I believe the look at it is critical and crucial. And I think every year asking your consultant, what's new out there? What are others like me doing? I do benchmarking every year for my clients. I think it's absolutely crucial. And I'm also looking always for what would have helped me when I was younger? What helped me when I lived in a rural setting? What do I know based on research about the care for people in, let's say, the southern states right now? Access to, doctors, especially doctors like them, are difficult at times. So what can they do, right? Could they add some telehealth? Is the telehealth that comes through the medical plan enough? Is there an outside way that they could provide, better mental health coverage or coaching? So I think looking at that every year, I recommend you benchmark. I recommend you do an employee survey. I recommend don't do those things if you're not going to follow the employee's advice, because research shows that if you don't at least acknowledge what was said in those question answer sessions, then it actually upsets employees further. But if you care about it, you want to do it, and I'd say Survey Monkey, right? You can get a certain number of Survey Monkey questions for free, and then just having a bigger license, either your broker may have it or another one of your vendors as well. So if your payroll HR benefits software doesn't include the ability to poll, ask them if it does. Sometimes they just need to turn it on, right? And I would say a lot of these systems are now including total compensation statements as well. So always ask. I tell people the worst thing someone can tell you is no. The best thing that someone could say is and mention something. I listen to what my clients, I ask them, what do you see? What are you seeing? I mean, I don't expect them to make me a better consultant, but I love and adore the feedback. And this year I was introduced to this payments vendor that allows employees to have a 0% to split up their medical and veterinary payments across up to 36 months. And so when we were discussing, do we want to cut out our PPO plans and go to HSA or high deductible plans, because we do see demonstrable savings over time, right? And control of costs and consumerism. The concern was, well, how are my employees going to, get to that $3,000 deductible or get, to that. So there are new plans that can do things like that are, less than $10 per employee per month, which don't require the employee to do a credit check, which don't require the employer to front the money or collect it when people leave. So what I'd say is every year, ask what's new, what's affecting you, and what can we do about it?
Definitely. I want to be able to hear from the group around the key challenges. We can launch this poll, and we've had a great conversation, but I realize we're almost out of time. So we may not get to our last poll, but we'll give folks literally 10 seconds to answer here around the key challenges and making progress and improving that benefits package. We hear from Laura that you need to be doing this every year. But we would love to hear from you about what key challenges maybe that you're facing in improving those packages. Okay, we'll give folks a little bit more time. And we will go ahead and close it out. I see it. Was sharing it out, I see just limited resources, budget, experienced staff to be able to do that. And I think, and then lack of alignment on what's critical in the employee benefits at the leadership level. We did have a question, Laura, and I think it will tie into this with the limited resources. How can small and medium-sized organizations really truly benchmark like what you were sharing without maybe necessarily breaking the bank?
Absolutely. So what I would say is, first of all, if they would like to be benchmarked, I am more than happy to do it. USI has one of the largest, if not largest, small, medium, and large benchmarking tool sets, and we invite our current clients. We actually input the data for them and then have them fill out the additional things we may not have visibility to. And then we also adore, for I like to call them future clients, but prospective clients, to give us their information. What they get back is they get back their how do I compare data, and no obligation to do anything other than participate. There are a number of different benefits organizations who offer benefits benchmarking. Some of them tailor more towards like Fortune 2000, right? And some of them are like we are, that are, really kind of geared for all different size employees. I would also I would encourage people to, to ask their broker for benchmarking. Some do have it, some don't. Some won't provide it unless they're asked, because there's a lot of things to do every year, right? It's part of my and our philosophy to say, all right, so here's how you compare every year as we look at their renewals. So I would also say join SHRM, or the Society for Human Resources, or, the American Payroll Association. And some of those organizations have benchmarks for specific things. I also know that World at Work also provides benchmarking. And every single little free help center, like, for example, we offer our clients mineral. I believe they have some minimal data. They also have things that'll provide, help with like handbook creation and keeping up with different law updates throughout. What I'd say is get on every free mailing list that's really data driven versus sales driven, that will provide you insight and information. And how do you do it without breaking the bank? I think it's about making sure that the people that are working with you are paying attention to you. Many times, someone starts off when they're a very small organization with their friends, or they go over and they say, hey, you help me with my personal auto and things like that. Can you help me with my benefits? And, once people get to around 50 employees and above, I would say that, although there are some very, very high quality smaller brokers, so I don't want to say that's always the wrong choice. It's not. But I'd say at a certain size, you're going to need a broker / consultant who really looks at everything, where they include benchmarking in everything they do, where they look at how should I be funded? Would I be a good fit for different kinds of programs? And if you're not getting what you need, when I was selling technology and outsourcing, I always provided 3 different recommendations for brokers. And I said, I know this person's great at this. I know that person's great at that. And I know this one is really great at this. You, employer, choose what's right for you.
And I think that's the biggest thing. Folks have to speak up, ask for help, and on those the vendors that are working with you, pressing them for additional support and resources. We've had an amazing discussion today. I do not want to miss this last part, but I do recognize that folks may have to leave. So I will move forward in our presentation and showing the recertification credits for those of you who are looking for our activity code, as well as our HRCI code for participating in the discussion today. And I do want to ask, I'll leave this up here for our participants so they will get their credits for joining us. But our final question I really have for you, Laura, is really truly providing access and equity for organizations who have employees all over the country, I know somebody who works remotely for an organization. They're based in Boston. She's living in Michigan, people living in Texas. How do you make sure that the benefits package that you pick is accessible for all of those folks and making sure that they can get quality access to healthcare? So we only have about 30 seconds to answer, but I would love for you to close out with the tips for that.
What I'd say is be very careful of narrow networks. So you may need to have an opener plan with a wider network and change the other elements of your plan design if you're multi-state. And the other thing I would say is, telemedicine can make a big difference. And there are some law changes coming up that should help with emergency billing and such. So make sure that is a key decision point in discussing with your consultants. And if there are follow-up questions around that, I'm more than happy to help.
Thank you so much, Laura, for your wealth of knowledge that you share with us today. Thank you, everyone, for participating in our webinar. And of course, if you would like to know more about our office, feel free to reach out to us at DEI@OurOffice.io. And this presentation is recorded and it will be posted on our website. We will also have a follow-up email, so you will have Laura's information as well. Thank you so much for joining us today, and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Bye.